Hi guys, and welcome to our next lesson on the famine. So today we're going to be looking again at the cruelty and relief efforts for the Irish people during the famine. So to start off with, we've a little bit of a thinking task, and I want you to see, can you think back and remember all of these terms that we used in the previous lessons? So we have laissez-faire economics, we have the public works, we have a man named Charles Trevelyan, and we have the coffin ships. So can you link them up to the descriptions on the other side of and the other table? So I'm going to ask you to pause here for 2 seconds just to complete this task. Okay, so hopefully everyone won't have struggled too much with this task. So we'll just show you what the answers here are. So the first one, laissez-faire economics, goes down to the bottom. It's political and economic belief system which discourage the government from intervening in the economy or offering financial aid to their people. Second one is the Public Works Scheme, a system which gave jobs to the starving people of Ireland. People were required to do back-breaking labour and were paid little. The third one, Charles Trevelyan. This is the man who was put in charge of running the public works system in Ireland in the early years of the famine. And the last one is the coffin ships. So that links over to a nickname given to the ships which Irish people often had to use in order to emigrate. Huge numbers died during their voyages on these vessels, hence the name the coffin ships. Okay, so well done if you got all those. Just a quick thinking back to see if we're remembering everything we've covered in previous lessons. So for today, we're going to continue to work on our understanding of the relief efforts made for the people of Ireland during the famine. So what was offered to them to try and help them through this terrible time. Have a factual knowledge of the workhouses. Okay, the workhouses in Ireland are something that have become part of myths and legends, and often the information that people hear about them may not be 100% true. So we're going to look at what the actual real truth about these is, and then examine the role of charity for the Irish people in this time. And this is very, very important to understand how much charity was given to the Irish people and how much aid did come, especially in the early years. So, to start off with the workhouses. So, as we go through this, I'm looking for you to answer these 5 questions on the right hand side. Okay, if you miss any of the questions, you may need to go and do a little bit of research. So, you should be listening, you should be writing as we go through this slide. You may want to pause from time to time just to make sure you're getting your answers written down. And if you want any extra information about the Irish workhouses, which I haven't given to you here, then you can use this website down at the bottom, so https irishworkhousecentre.ie. It's some great information on the workhouses. So, the workhouses, what are they? The workhouses were something set up before the famine. There was a number of workhouses in Ireland, and they were there to try and provide something for the poorest people in society. Now, it's not necessarily there to make the poor people feel good about themselves or anything like that, but to try and take them off the streets and try and make them productive members of society. Victorian society wanted to work like a well-oiled machine, and the paupers, the poorest people, weren't contributing to the system in a way that was seen as significant, and so things like the workhouses were opened up in order to force them almost to contribute to the system. Now, the important thing here is the workhouse is not a prison. No one is forced to enter a workhouse, and no one is forced to stay in a workhouse. You can leave them if you want. You can come and you can go. People do often think of them like prisons, and that's more to do with the conditions inside of them. Okay, but it is important to realize that the workhouses were something that people voluntarily entered, and huge numbers voluntarily entered them, as we'll talk about in a second. And you can see in this picture here, people are trying to get in. The workhouses during the famine were totally overloaded with people. So many people wanted into them. And very few people actually left. But this is not a prison, so you need to be very careful about that. A lot of people kind of make a mistake there. So what were the workhouses? Essentially what the workhouse was is when you were the most poor and destitute person, if you're living on a street and you have nowhere else to turn, and for people who do enter workhouse, they literally have nowhere else to go. They have the choice between starving to death on the streets or entering the workhouse. And there's huge numbers of people who actually choose to take their chances with starvation on the street rather than enter these buildings. But the people who do come to them are in this terrible, terrible situation. They've made the choice that they prefer to take their chances in the workhouse than try to survive outside of it. When you get into a workhouse, the workhouse is there to get these people off the streets. People enter it. The first thing that happens is the families, you're forced the family to enter as a whole family. The reason for this really is that landlords at the time didn't want their lands to be covered in peasants and people who weren't working and landless labourers and things like that. They wanted only people who were working and contributing on their land. And so to deal with this, the workhouses made the rule that if one person was to enter, the whole family needed to enter with them. Once they entered, the family was going to be immediately separated. So women were sent to one area, men to another, and children to another. Okay, so children are being taken away from their families, from their parents. Parents are being separated. The only exception would be very young babies would be allowed to stay with their mother for breastfeeding and things like that, and just for basic care. But this is only for very young, up to 2 or 3 years old. Anyone over this age is separated away. Once in the workhouse, everyone works. The youngest children to the oldest people, everyone is expected to work. If you can't work, you can't be in the workhouse. Okay, so everyone in here is expected to work and to do very, very difficult jobs. Okay, things the workhouses will have done will be a lot of things with clothing, so washing clothes now, which in the time is very, very arduous work. It's not easy work. They will be providing services to the rest of the community. So even though the workhouses are there to kind of take these people away from the community, they offer this function of of doing work for the community at the same time. Um, so the people in the workhouse, when they come in, are all separated into different groups. They are not permitted to speak to each other if they do see each other. So depending on the workhouse, sometimes they may be in, crossing paths from time to time. They are not permitted to speak to each other at all at any point. These rules are strictly enforced. Right? You cannot break these rules. The conditions inside the workhouses varied. Now, at the start, they were not designed to be horrible. They're designed to offer the basic living standard. However, over time, they weren't able to provide this anymore. And what we see happening is the workhouses becoming totally overcrowded, where rooms that were built for, say, 20 to 30 people could have twice that amount of people actually living and sleeping and doing living their lives in these rooms. Every day was intentionally made grueling, however. You were forced to work an incredibly difficult time. And this comes back to a Victorian idea that poor people are poor because they're lazy. And so the workhouse is going to make these people not be lazy. And if they decide to leave the workhouse, then they'll have learned how to be good workers and they will never want to be poor again or they'll never want to be lazy again because they won't want to go back to this kind of grueling labour. And this is the mentality that's going on in the workhouse, which seems very, very strange to us today, but this is what the people that believed time believed. So the workhouses were very, very cruel places, and huge numbers of people died within them. But they are counted. We would look at them in terms of relief because they are offering something to these destitute people. These people, they do. A lot of people do live in them. A lot of people spend their entire lives in them, and the workhouses last for a long time after this. So there is positives and negatives to them. People are fed, they are clothed, they are kept warm, they are provided shelter. However, the workhouses are totally overcrowded. The life in them is very, very difficult, and they're definitely not pleasant places to be. So, in terms of the workhouses, that was one of the major relief systems, and actually built up to a huge system. So, as I said at the start, there's only a small number of workhouses around the country. By the end of the famine, there's 163 of these buildings around the country, and all of them have become oversubscribed by the end of the famine. Okay, and this leads us into the next section, which is the charity work. So make sure you're answering those 5 questions, and you're going to submit those 5 questions to me on Teams alongside task 3, which is to write a detailed paragraph about the importance of the Quakers and the charity work during the Irish famine. So, the Quakers, who are they in charity work? The Quakers are a particular religion. They're a very, very small religion in terms of Ireland. At the time of the famine, there was only around 3,000 Quakers living in the country. The Quakers were tended to be not too poor in terms of in Ireland in terms of their economic status. They were doing, they weren't the poorest people lived. They weren't cottiers and landless labourers. Okay, and when they seen the destitution of the people of Ireland and starvation, people dying, they believed it was their job to intervene, that they couldn't allow these people to starve like this. And the Quakers did some amazing work in this big towns and cities around Ireland. Their main job was that they set up what we call soup kitchens. And soup kitchens were places where the poor and destitute could come in order to get food. And now it wasn't the most luxurious or most delicious food you're going to find anywhere. It was a very simple broth, but it provided the nutrients these people needed. And the Quakers did this off their own back. They just decided to go and help out. And they did this well before the government. So the government does later on, after the public works closes, I think around 1848, but you can check that yourselves. The government follows the Quakers' example and realizes the soup kitchens are going to be a good thing to provide for the people. But the Quakers started off, and they do this with their own money and by doing a huge amount of collections for charity. Now, a huge amount of money comes to Ireland in the early years of the famine. Notably, America and Canada provide huge amounts of charity. We also see England providing quite a bit, and then other places around the globe that you might not think of. The Middle East, some of the leaders in the Middle East send large amounts of money, for example. But a huge amount of charity is coming to the people of Ireland. However, it's never going to be enough to really provide when the government's not stepping in. So the Quakers are doing their best. They definitely saved thousands upon thousands of lives, and it's a very small number of them actually involved, only 3,000 people, and they do a huge amount. So they're definitely worth mentioning, and they're definitely worth remembering for their efforts and for how much they did for their fellow Irish people. One of the most notable charitable donations we see comes from the Choctaw Indians, Choctaw Native American tribe in America, who are themselves an incredibly poor people who, if you look at the history of their own lives, have been forced off their land, have been subjected to huge persecution by the by the American colonies, and really are living in a very, very difficult place. So these are very, very poor people in America. But they club together and gather as much money as they can and manage to get $800, which at the time is a much bigger amount of money than we would think of it now. They do everything that they can, these very, very poor people, in order to try and help the Irish. So it's something that's definitely been remembered. There is a memorial, I believe in Galway. We'll look at some of the memorials in a later lesson, trying and commemorate what these Choctaw Native Americans offered to the Irish people. That there's solidarity between the poorest people in the world together, trying to support each other. Actually just recently, however, you can see history coming to life. When COVID hit, a number of Native American tribes were hit quite badly by COVID, just due to the life on their reserves. They wouldn't have had the supplies or the medical treatment or any of the things that they needed. And when a online petition went up to try to raise money for these people, a total of 6 million, I believe, when I'm making this video, was raised in order to try and help them, and over 1 million of that came directly from Ireland in memory of what these people had done for the Irish during the famine. So you can see the legacy of their charity, their aid that they offered, that is now being repaid, and you can see the importance of understanding what different people did at the time of the famine, how it affects life today. Now remember, $800 back then, whilst it was not equal to $1 million now, it was still a huge amount of money for them, absolutely massive amount for what they could put together. And we also remember this is a very small group of people, and they are providing who are living in poverty. So what Ireland as a one of the richest countries in the world now is providing is definitely, we don't agree. It's definitely trying to match that degenerate spirit of the Native Americans from the time that they sent aid to Ireland. So the task here is then to write a detailed paragraph on some of the information we've just gone through about the Quakers and the charity work during the Irish famine. There is a suggested website there that you can use, so thewildgeese.irish/profile/blogs, etc. You can copy that, or you can just go and do some of your own research. You're going to need to find out a little bit more information than maybe I've offered here. You might want to look at what the soup is made of. You may want to look at where the soup kitchens were, who they offered food to when people came, etc. Do a little bit of your own research here. So at the end of the lesson, then you're going to submit task 2, which is those questions on the workhouses, and task 3 on charity and the Quakers to me via Teams, please. Alright, if you have any questions, guys, just send me an email and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can.